The Galactic Assembly's Grand Hall was a masterpiece of elegance, an ancient chamber of polished obsidian, shimmering with nebula-lit ceilings and floating platforms where representatives from thousands of civilizations hovered. Here history was made. Treaties were signed. Wars were declared. And today they were all talking about humans. A reptilian ambassador from the Vashtek Confederacy flicked his tongue in agitation. "We cannot allow these things into the assembly." His voice, guttural and heavy, slithered through the chamber's vast expanse. "They are undisciplined, destructive and, most of all, violent beyond reason." A chorus of agreement rippled through the gathered species. A three-eyed diplomat from the Ulari Dominion added, "They lack the refinement of a civilized species. Their history is nothing but war, conquest, and destruction." From the floating platform reserved for humanity, Ambassador Donovan leaned back in his chair, sipping from a cup of what the others would consider toxic sludge. To humans it was coffee. He smirked. "Go on." The murmurs of discontent grew louder. "They have no respect for hierarchy," the Vashtek hissed. "They form republics. They let anyone lead. And their soldiers, have you seen their soldiers? They throw themselves into battle with reckless abandon, wielding oversized weapons, smashing through formations as if pain is merely an inconvenience." An ambassador from the refined, moth-like Yilarathi clicked her mandibles in disgust. "I saw a human soldier charge into battle after losing an arm. He wrapped it in cloth and kept fighting." The hall filled with horrified gasps. "They have no honor. They fight like beasts. They laugh during war." Ambassador Donovan calmly took another sip of his coffee. The insectoid Gotak, a historian by nature, exhaled through his spiracles. "There is only one name fitting for such creatures." His voice echoed through the chamber as he proclaimed, "They are space orcs." The entire assembly fell silent. The name carried weight. Orcs, monstrous creatures from old galactic folklore, primal and savage. A species that thrived in war, cared little for rules, and relished combat not as a necessity but as a joy. Ambassador Donovan chuckled. "Well, that's just rude." The Yilarathi diplomat narrowed her eyes. "So you deny it?" He shrugged. "I never said that." A moment of stunned silence. Then the entire hall erupted into chaos. Born for war, built for battle. Out beyond the rim of civilized space, past the bureaucratic nonsense of the Galactic Assembly, war was brewing. The Chiron swarm, a terrifying force of biomechanical nightmares, was sweeping through the known galaxy, consuming entire civilizations in its path. The Assembly had been talking about stopping them for years. Humanity? Humanity deployed. It started with whispers. The swarm had underestimated their new opponent. After all, humanity was young. Barely a blip on the galactic scale. Then the reports came in. Chiron war fleets, slaughtered. Hive ships, boarded and burned from the inside. Planets on the verge of annihilation, defended by humans wielding weapons too large, too loud, and too devastating to be reasonable. The Chiron didn't just lose battles. They were butchered. Entire planets were liberated by human shock troops. Men and women wearing grins as they stormed through enemy lines, wielding weapons no sane species would dare to carry, let alone fire. The galaxy watched in horror as humans did what they always did. They adapted. They evolved. And they thrived in the one thing they were supposedly ashamed of. War. The Assembly had no choice. Humanity had proven itself far beyond any measure of strength. Now the galaxy had to decide. Would they fear the space orcs? Or would they follow them? The Galactic Assembly had spent centuries believing they had tamed war. Conflicts were fought with strict regulations, elegant battle strategies, and carefully worded treaties. Even in war, diplomacy ruled. Then humanity arrived. The Chiron swarm had been unstoppable, devouring entire empires with grotesque efficiency. The insectoid horde consumed planets, leaving nothing behind but lifeless husks. Their bioships outnumbered every known fleet. Their ground forces swarmed battlefields in the billions. And yet, they were losing. To humans. The broadcast that shocked the galaxy. The Galactic Assembly had been following the war closely, but nothing could have prepared them for what they saw next. The footage came from a battlefield on Drenva 4. A war-torn wasteland, its skies black with burning wreckage, its soil soaked with the blood of a dozen species. Chiron warriors, towering, multi-limbed nightmares, charged forward, their bioblades slicing through the air. And standing against them? Humans. Not in formations. Not in neat, disciplined lines. No, that wasn't the human way. They were scattered, covered in dirt and blood, their weapons massive and impractical. Some had heavy machine guns mounted on their backs, walking fortresses of steel and carnage. Others carried flamethrowers that turned Chiron warriors into screeching, blackened husks. And some fought with their bare hands. The camera focused on one soldier, a human who had lost his helmet, his face bloodied but grinning. A Chiron warrior lunged at him, its talons flashing. The human caught the strike with his bare arm, twisting it with sickening force. The Chiron screeched as its limbs snapped. The soldier drew his combat knife and drove it into the creature's skull. Then he looked toward the camera. And he winked. The assembly chamber erupted into chaos as representatives screamed in horror. "They fight like they enjoy it," one shrieked. "They don't just survive war, they thrive in it," another whispered. The Vashtec ambassador turned to the human representative, his voice shaking. "What kind of creatures are you?" Ambassador Donovan simply smiled. "You called us orcs." He took a sip of his coffee. "So we decided to live up to it." The call for help. A week later, the Chiron swarm made a desperate push toward the core worlds. The assembly, once content to sit back and let humanity fight their war, realized the horror creeping toward their own planets. They needed help. And there was only one species insane enough to provide it. The assembly chambers, usually filled with long-winded debates and legal proceedings, fell silent as the Yilarathi delegate stood. She hesitated before speaking, mandibles clicking nervously. "Humanity," she said. We need you." A heavy silence. Then Ambassador Donovan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You're asking the space orcs to save you?" The Yilarathi diplomat swallowed hard. "Yes." Donovan grinned. "Then let's get to work." The Galactic Assembly had never witnessed a full-scale human war campaign before. They had seen skirmishes, heard terrifying stories, and watched the horror of individual human warriors tearing through enemy lines. But this was something else. The moment humanity accepted the call for aid, they didn't just send fleets. They sent hell itself. Operation Warchief. It began with the arrival of the Havoc-class dreadnoughts, monstrous warships that eclipsed anything the Assembly had ever built. Each one bristled with more firepower than an entire planetary defense fleet. They were named with unsettling directness: Doombringer, Ragnarok, Warspite, Bloodfang. And then came the ground troops. Not neat formations. Not color-coded battalions with flawless marching. No. Humanity deployed shock hordes. Armored drop pods slammed into the surface of Illith Prime, a besieged assembly world overrun by Chiron forces. Instead of automated drones or precise strike teams, the pods burst open, unleashing screaming human warriors into the battlefield. There was no hesitation. There was no fear. Only fury. The assembly commanders watched the horror unfold through live battle feeds. The Chiron warriors, a species designed for war, recoiled. Their instinct-driven hive mind tactics fell apart as humans charged toward them, ripping through their ranks with wild, chaotic efficiency. One feed captured a towering Chiron warrior, nearly 10 feet tall, locking blades with a human wielding a massive chainsword. The human grinned and bit the Chiron's throat out. The assembly watches in horror and awe. In the war chamber of the Galactic Assembly, the gathered diplomats sat frozen, staring at the holoscreens. The Sarthan ambassador's claws dug into the metal table. They're not even using formation tactics. "No," the Vashtec delegate whispered. "They're using rage." The Yilarathi diplomat, who had begged humanity for help, turned to Ambassador Donovan, her mandibles trembling. This is what you call war?" Donovan sipped his coffee. This is just the warm-up." The battle turns. The Chiron swarm, used to overwhelming its enemies with sheer numbers, suddenly found itself outmatched in the one way it never expected: pure, unrelenting aggression. The battlefield was a nightmare. Human berserkers, some of them laughing, waded through the insectoid warriors, tearing them apart. A squad of human shock troops, low on ammo, resorted to using their guns as clubs, smashing through Chiron exoskeletons. One human lost his weapon entirely, so he grabbed a Chiron's severed claw and wielded that instead. And all the while, human war cries echoed across the battlefield, carried through comms, drowning out the usual screams of dying soldiers. Even human ships fought differently. The Doombringer didn't fire from a distance like a typical warship. Instead, it rammed a Chiron hive cruiser at full speed, splitting it in half. "Who the hell does that?" an assembly officer shrieked. Ambassador Donovan simply leaned back, arms crossed. "Space orcs, my friend." The moment that changed everything. The battle for Illith Prime raged for days, then weeks. And yet, the humans did not break. Chiron forces collapsed under the pressure, their hive mind unraveling as panic spread through their ranks. They had never faced an enemy that enjoyed war. And then, it happened. Live feeds captured the moment human forces finally reached the Chiron command fortress. The gates burst open. A single human soldier walked inside. No armor. No weapon. Just bloodied fists. The Chiron overlord, a towering monstrosity with 6 blade arms, screeched in fury. "What are you?" The human cracked his knuckles. "The one who knocks." A new kind of power. The war for Illith Prime was over. The swarm, once thought invincible, was broken. Their overlord, defeated in hand-to-hand combat, lay in a pile of shattered exoskeleton. The assembly fleets, which had been losing the war before humanity's arrival, were suddenly advancing on all fronts. And for the first time, the galaxy understood something terrifying. They had thought the humans were wild, reckless creatures. But they were something far worse. They were warriors. And now, they had taken the war personally. The fall of Illith Prime sent shockwaves through the known universe. The Chiron swarm had never lost a major war before. No species had ever turned back their tide. Entire civilizations had been wiped out, their homeworlds reduced to husks, their fleets shattered like glass. And yet, humanity had broken them. The last battle's recordings spread faster than official reports. Footage of a lone, bloodied human warrior standing over the corpse of the Chiron overlord became legendary. It played on repeat across every galactic network, overlaid with shocked commentary, analysis, and, most notably, whispers of fear. Because if the Chirons could be broken, what did that mean for everyone else? The problem with victory. Ambassador Donovan stepped into the Galactic Assembly's War Council, his usual easygoing smirk gone. He could feel the tension in the air. The moment he sat, a dozen different voices erupted. They don't stop. They're still pushing forward. This wasn't just a battle. They've turned it into a crusade. Donovan sighed and took a sip of his ever-present coffee. He had warned them. After Illith Prime, humanity didn't stop. They had entered the war as a favor. Now they were the war. Fleet after fleet surged into Chiron space. Entire human battle groups refused to stand down, even after victory was assured. Every battle became a hunt. Every enemy ship a trophy. The war no longer belonged to the Assembly. It belonged to the humans. The Chiron's desperate message. Across the void, Chiron-controlled systems collapsed one by one. They were still a vast and terrifying force, but for the first time in their history they were the ones running. They tried adapting. They tried new tactics. Ambushes. Hit-and-run strikes. Nothing worked. Because humans loved war. Their fleets should have slowed. Their armies should have exhausted themselves. Instead, they only seemed to grow more enthusiastic. Finally, with no other choice, the Chirons did something they had never done before. They sent a transmission to the Galactic Assembly. "We surrender. Please, stop them." The Assembly's last, desperate attempt. The War Council voted unanimously. Humanity had to be stopped, not because they had done anything wrong but because they were unstoppable. If the war continued, there might not be anything left of the Chiron species. A delegation was sent directly to the Doombringer, where Admiral Vasquez, leader of the human war campaign, met them with arms crossed. "Admiral," the Vashtec diplomat pleaded, "the Chirons have surrendered." Vasquez raised an eyebrow. "So?" The room fell silent. The Yilarathi diplomat carefully stepped forward. "The war, it's over. We've won." Vasquez stared at them then chuckled. "No," he turned to the holographic map, where red markers signified still active Chiron forces. "We don't win until they're all gone." The delegation recoiled. "Admiral," the Sarthan representative hissed. "You cannot mean." "I do." Vasquez's voice was calm. "You asked us to end the war. We'll end it." The Yilarathi representative's voice trembled. "But there will be nothing left of them." Vasquez smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Exactly." The final battle. The Assembly made one last desperate move. They called the one man they thought could stop it. Ambassador Donovan. When he arrived on Vasquez's flagship, the tension was palpable. The entire war room fell silent as he strode in, casual as ever. Vasquez gave him a nod. "Donovan." The ambassador sat across from him. "We need to talk." The war room remained dead silent. Then Donovan sighed and leaned forward. "Vasquez, I get it. We're humans. We finish fights." The admiral said nothing. "But there's a difference between winning and extermination." Donovan's voice was quiet. "You know that." Vasquez's jaw tightened. "They won't stop. They never stop. And neither do we, Donovan countered. That's the problem. The Admiral clenched his fists. After what they did, you're asking me to show them mercy? Donovan shook his head. No, he met Vasquez's gaze unblinking. I'm asking you to show them something scarier. Silence. Then Vasquez exhaled. Damn you, Donovan. The order was given. The human fleets pulled back. And the war at long last was over. The new fear. The Chirans barely survived. What remained of their species retreated to a few isolated systems, their numbers decimated, their once mighty swarm reduced to refugees. But they weren't the only ones who had changed. The galaxy had witnessed something unprecedented. They had seen war in its purest, rawest form. And they had realized the terrifying truth. Humanity hadn't just won the war. They had held back. The galaxy's greatest superpowers held secret meetings. Treaties were rewritten. Borders were strengthened. And from that day forward, one unwritten rule echoed across every corner of the universe. Never make war with the space orcs. And that, my friends, is why they call us the monsters of the void. If you want to hear more insane human war stories, subscribe now. Because trust me, this is just the beginning.